Okay, today we're beginning chapter 44. Our learning is L'ilei Nishmas Tzivia Bas Rabbi Yosef Halevi. This chapter 44 is going to bring together a number of ideas, and the Alter Rebbe references directly that we have talked about in the past. So it's one of those sort of summary points that we've that we've now arrived at, that gives us some collective understanding now that we put the parts together. Remember that on the title page, the Alter Rebbe refers to Tanya as the long, short way. And you do have to put in a lot of background time and information in order to reach the conclusions. So it's built in a series and a pattern and a ladder and so forth. And we start to see a lot of that coming together here in chapter 44. Chapters 42 and 43 spoke a lot, predominantly, about the concept of Yiras Hashem, the fear of Hashem. And we noted at the time that it might catch us a little bit, so to speak, by surprise, that the Alter Rebbe recommends that we begin with Yiras Hashem, with the fear of Hashem. And again, we underscored that fear of Hashem is not about fear of punishment, because that's fear of punishment. That's not fear of Hashem. What we mean by Yiras Hashem is the fear of being separated from Hashem. That's what we are most afraid of, that we will not be connected with Hashem, that we'll be abandoned, we'll be isolated and forgotten. Once we have that yira, we now have a premise to build on Avas Hashem. Avas Hashem is not just like I say, I love Hashem, like I love my favorite activity, but Avas Hashem means my great desire to be associated with Hashem. And in the last chapter already, we introduced two general categories that we call, or that we describe in the pursuit of Avas Hashem. We have Avas Olam, which is a love born of this world. I look around at the world, I see its functionality. I see a watch, I know there must be a watchmaker. And since my most basic passion is to be alive, and Hashem is the source of my life, so therefore I have a desire to be associated with Hashem. I have a gratitude, I have a longing, I have Avas Hashem. That, though, is going to be limited to my capacity to appreciate the world. The more I appreciate about its nuance, the more I appreciate its creator. Then there is a more profound, all-encompassing level of Hashem, of love of Hashem, which is called Ava Rabbah, an overwhelming love of Hashem that spills out beyond any categorization. Now, in this chapter 44, the Alter Rebbe is going to start to speak about in greater detail the way in which we can develop that love. And this is one of the great gifts of Chassidus. This week is Yutes Kislev, tomorrow night and Tuesday, the Rosh Hashanah for Chassidus. So I'll take the opportunity to put in the Lubavitch commercial. You got to throw in the Lubavitch commercial. What is the Lubavitch commercial? Of course, everyone in Torah is pursuing proper conduct and what we call good midos and so on. And in every yeshiva, they talk to the students about, being polite and kind and patient and tolerant and friendly and generous and so on. So what did Hasidus do that other communities and even lahavdil in the secular world? And every parent hopes to raise their children with basic common manners and so forth. So what is, in fact, the chiddush, the innovative point of Hasidus? So you say, well, we have a different set of values, et cetera, et cetera. But you're just quibbling. Yes, it's true that in some communities they treasure hard work, and in other communities they treasure compassion. Okay, mine's better than yours. We just get into an argument. What Chassidus does that is distinctive is it gives us a top-down understanding and capacity not only for understanding the midos, but for developing the midos, fine-tuning the midos, and thus applying the midos. Meaning, we can look at the world and say, I like kindness. And let's go look and see what Torah can tell me about kindness. But the premise there is, I like kindness. And maybe some people don't like kindness. Not everybody likes democracy. Not everybody likes, merit. They want people to be awarded based on their status, whatever it may be. But Hasidus talks about it from the top down and gives us a method through which we can develop even character traits and emotions that we may think that we are not naturally endowed with. Meaning, there is a perspective that says, look, either you love it or you don't. You tried it, you didn't like it, it's not for you. And that could be applicable when it comes to activities or food. So I tried it, I didn't like it, and I move on. And you can't really talk someone into liking it. If they don't like it, they don't like it. So Chassidus, in its description about the love of Hashem, which we're going to emphasize here in chapter 44, we run into a couple of ideas. One, every Jew does innately love Hashem. And again, love means the innate desire to be associated therewith, because the fact that we have a neshama, which is a part of Hashem, it is the nature of the neshama to wish to be driven towards that which it longs for. So the nature of all matter is to be drawn to itself. And the neshama itself, being an actual part of Hashem, is therefore drawn to Hashem. So you naturally do have a desire to be connected with Hashem, which again, we're going to call love of Hashem. Even if a person says, well, I am so disconnected from my neshama that I don't have a love for Hashem. Or, as is sometimes a little bit more common, somebody, God forbid, had such a bad experience that they say, well, I don't love Hashem because I don't like what Hashem did. So can they do anything about it? And our answer is yes. That is, the process that we're going to describe here in chapter 44 is to tell you that just like we have a mitzvah to put up a mezuzah, but then we have a whole a series of laws as to what is a mezuzah and how do you write a mezuzah and how do you make a mezuzah. Well, similarly, we have a mitzvah to love Hashem, the Lord, your all with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. So how do I do that? So it sounds like, what do you mean? Just love Hashem. Well, what if I don't love Hashem? How do you just tell me to just love Hashem? How is that a reasonable expectation that a person should just, quote unquote, love Hashem? Is there a method through which we can stir up that love, that we can bring that love to the fore, and especially if it has been calloused by a bad experience, if it's been crusted over by either pursuit of other loves or by unpleasant experiences. So these chapters here, starting here in chapter 44, are descriptions and strategies for how we can, and therefore must, uncover our innate love for Hashem. So here we go. Vihine, and again, this chapter is a Vav chapter, begins with the letter Vav, because already at the end of the last chapter, we started to talk about the two levels of love, and it's going to be continued here in 44 and 45. In chapter 46, we're a little bit started on a different path. Kol madregas ava mi beis madregas elu, ava rabba v'ava selam. All of these two levels of love that we have discussed heretofore, namely the overflowing love, not a love that is commensurate to some deep degree of understanding, and Abbas Olam, a love born of this world, a love that is aligned with my perception of this world, my appreciation for this world. Now, here the Alter Rebbe says something. On the surface, it may seem to be incredibly obvious, but he says all these forms of love are divisible into infinite characteristics of love. Now, here's where the mitzvah of love Hashem is going to sort of differentiate itself from the mitzvah of the mezuzah. When it comes to the mitzvah of the mezuzah, there's not a lot of variation there. You don't get to write your own mezuzah. And what I'm saying is, come up with your own poetry to put in the mezuzah, and you don't get to pick the colors, and you don't get to pick the wording, and so on. So when it comes to love of Hashem, the Alter Rebbe points out that there are going to be infinite levels of love of Hashem. Now, again, that may seem incredibly obvious. However, the point that the Alter Rebbe, the subtlety that the Alter Rebbe is making here is, it's not about, do you love Hashem? Yes. It's not a yes, no. It's about the ongoing developing dynamic of our love for Hashem. And again, it may seem like a funny thing. We don't talk so much about loving Hashem. You love Hashem, of course. Like, what does that actually mean? How is it understood? Well, one level it's understood is that I love Hashem more than any other desire, and therefore no thing is going to distract me from my love of Hashem. So if Hashem says, keep Shabbos, and somebody says, if you don't keep Shabbos, you'll make a lot of money, or the story with the previous Rebbe where they said that the gun will persuade people to change their minds, and he said, that's if you have one world and many gods, meaning there's a hierarchy. And at some point I say, well, come on, I'm not going to. So Hashem, the love of Hashem is the ultimate love. And therefore, nothing will dissuade me from that love. That's one aspect. But then we get into the nuance. I mean, that's the yes, no, check the box. I love Hashem. Yes, yes, therefore I do, therefore I don't, et cetera, et cetera. But here the Alter Rebbe is talking about, can we get into a nuance of that love of Hashem? Can we develop that into something very with color and depth and specificity to it? So the Alter Rebbe says that it's going to be measured by each person's shear. Now, lefum shiura delay is a term of art. It means each one according to their measure. The word shear is a measure. And we use it. Now, how much matzah do you have to eat? We would say, what is the shear of matzah that you have to eat? What does it mean? Each person according to his shear, to his amount. Amount of what? Is it a quantitative or is it a characteristic? So the Alter Rebbe quotes the Zohar on the pasuk. You recognize it. Noida b'sharim baila. This is a quote from Mishlei. It's incorporated in the Eshes Chayil that we say Friday night. And we say, her husband is known at the gates. What does that mean, he's known at the gates? Okay, in the simple understanding of that pasuk, it means that the most revered people sat at the gates. We have that even in Chumash. Lot sat at the gate because he was a person of stature. The gates is sort of what we would call like City Hall. But here in our context, in the Zohar, we have the luxury of reading it more poetically and a little and less literally. So we read it as Da Kutsha Brichu. This is a reference to Hashem. Hashem is the husband-wife relationship is a common metaphor for for Hashem and the Jewish people. So again, it's not a yes-no, just like in a dynamic relationship between two people. The ihu is yadav, that each person knows. And again, when we say know, we don't just mean I know it like I happen to know the capital of all the states, but it means it is an ongoing pursuit of an intense union. Vistabek, and an attachment, l'chol chad, each person lefu madem meshara bilibeha, through the way in which it is measured in their heart. So here, the Zohar, which the Alter Rebbe is incorporating, is using a dynamic of the word shear, which translates as a quantity, an amount, and shar, which is a gate, and that just as a gate is designed to restrict or open up for the flow of traffic. Similarly, within each person, they have the shar, the gate, the shear, the character of their love of Hashem. So love is not just a generic yes-no. It's got to be nuanced. And this is part of, I hopefully say it every, this is the whole Chiddush of Chassidus, which we say every class, hopefully. The whole Chiddush of Chassidus is that our love for Hashem needs to be nuanced and developed and matured, and not just yes, no. And not just because that happens to be a mitzvah, like the mitzvah of mezuzahs. There's a mitzvah to love Hashem. It is, in a sense, the premise, as we have talked about before, of all mitzvahs. We talked about that love and fear are the premise of all mitzvah performance. I love Hashem, and therefore I do that which brings me close with Hashem. And I fear Hashem, or I fear separation from Hashem, and therefore I avoid anything that will take me away from Hashem. So this mitzvah can be nuanced. Again, prior to Chassidus or outside of Chassidus, love and fear are often thought of. Either you got it or you don't. You love it or you don't. I went to shul and I loved it. It was a great experience. I learned Torah. I loved it. And this guy says, I went, I didn't love it. So therefore it's not for me. So I'm not going. And again, like the love of art or even of food, it can it be developed, or do we just say, well, look, your taste buds like chocolate and they don't like coconut, and that's it. Just sort of that's just the way it is. You tried it, you didn't like it, and you move on. But here, Chassidus is not only talking about that it can be developed and matured, but that we have to take an active role in developing and maturing our love of Hashem. And not just, well, I'm not that kind of person. It's not for me. It doesn't work for me. I don't like it. We have to become actively involved in developing our love for Hashem, nuancing our love for Hashem. And that is, again, via mind rules the heart. The heart gets shaped by the mind and so on. And therefore we say, and for this reason, there is a pasuk which the Alter Rebbe is referring to here, that it says, that the hidden matters are for Hashem. This is a pasuk in Devarim, and the revealed matters are for us. Now, commonly we understand this pasuk to mean that we deal, we got to do what we got to do. We are, as they say, today is the time for work. We are day workers. Our job is to do Torah and mitzvahs. Why is it that the righteous may suffer and the wicked may prosper, and it rains when I don't want it to rain, and things, those are the hidden matters. You can't know them. That's up to Hashem. And we have story after story about things that appear to be horrible, only to later be revealed for being wonderful. We love to tell those stories, and we quote this pasuk, the hidden matters are to Hashem, our God, and the revealed matters are for us. That's the common way that we understand that pasuk. Here, the Alter Rebbe is borrowing this pasuk and reading it in a bit of a different, more creative way. Hanastodes, that which is hidden, meaning we can't tell who loves Hashem more. It's not some sort of visible experience. We may be able to see who, makes brachas more often, who spends more hours studying Torah. But we cannot see what is hidden. And that is truly what is to Hashem. Meaning, rather than the common understanding that the hidden matters, in other words, the whys and how come this happens and that happens, is something only Hashem can control, and we can't control it. We have to do what we have to do, and we don't know what the consequence is going to be. And we have no way of manipulating it. And it's not our job. Like we say, do God's work, don't do God's job. It's not up to us to figure out the hidden matters and why the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Here, the Alter Rebbe is saying it's a different level. The Nestoris, that which is hidden, meaning that which is deep within us, whether we have love for Hashem, not whether we are compliant, whether we have fear for Hashem, that is truly what is to Hashem. The Nigolos, that which is revealed, what we can observe, the physical performance and execution of the rules, that's Lanu, that's what we see. That's what we can measure, touch, and feel. That's what's recognizable. That's what's observable. But that, in a certain way, the Alter Rebbe is saying, that's for us. That's the good. That's what's good for us. What's really meaningful to Hashem, what is truly to Hashem, is Hanastores, is that which is hidden. Now, this makes a lot of people very uncomfortable because we're really, really good at doing stuff. Give me matzah, I will write a whole book of Talmud about how to bake matzah. Give me a lulav and esrog, we'll spend hours with a jeweler's loop to look at our esrog. Tell me to love Hashem. Well, what do you want me to? What am I supposed to do? And you think about in Torah, in our calendar, Yom Kippur, the holiest day, there's no thing to do. What are you supposed to do on Yom Kippur? There isn't any action. There's no matzah, there's no lulav, there's no shofar, there's no thing. It's just about being with the infinity of Hashem. Now that's hard. And it was one of the things that they sort of were a little squirrely about with Hasidus, because like, well, what am I supposed to do? What's the action item? And this is what the Alter Rebbe is emphasizing here, that truly what is distinctive to Hashem is that which is hidden, that which can't be seen. And again, I think in English, sometimes when we talk about something that's hidden, we hide things because we're embarrassed. I don't want anyone to see, because maybe it's a shame, maybe I'm ashamed of it, or maybe I'm afraid that it won't measure up, or whatever it may be. But Hanastados, that which is hidden, which is our true love and fear of Hashem, which is not visible to the eye, that is truly what is to Hashem. And here the Alter Rebbe continues. The Torah, that is the opportunity for study, the opportunity for mitzvahs, that's for everybody. That everybody does. But when it comes to the love and fear and love of Hashem, that's going to be individualized. In the Sikha from the Rebbe, he asked the question, what leads Korach to begin his rebellion at that moment? Korach, you recall, rebels against Moshe because he claims that Moshe is just playing favorites, and he gave the status of Kohen Gadol to his brother, and he's cheating everybody else. Now, this argument that Korach makes doesn't seem to be prompted in the moment by anything particular. By the time Korach makes his argument, Aaron has long been the Kohen Gadol. So why is it that Korach decides that this was his opportune moment to strike? So the Rebbe points out that the story immediately preceding Korach is the story of the spies, that the Jewish people get a little worried and hesitant, and they come up with this idea to send in the spies, and the spies return and say that the land is beautiful, but it will consume its inhabitants. And particularly, as Chassidus explains it, that the spies were afraid that the people would become so consumed in setting up the land that they would forget their holiness, and they would get consumed with materialism. Hashem is, of course, not happy with the spies, as we know, and that leads to the 40 years in the wilderness. What then is the lesson from the story of the spies? Is that the goal is about the mitzvah actions and not just about staying in the wilderness and being holy. Aha! So here, Korach, who's been lying in wait, sees his opportunity. So he makes the argument, you see, it's only about the mitzvah actions. So when it comes to mitzvah actions, everybody's the same. Moshe Rabbeinu eats matzah, I eat matzah. Moshe Rabbeinu says a bracha, I say a bracha. So Korach, seizing on the lesson from the spies, goes to the opposite extreme and says the only thing that is of significance is mitzvah physical performance, physical mitzvah actions. And in that, everybody is the same, as the Alter Rebbe just wrote here. Torah achas mishpat echelu kulanu. There's one Torah and one set of laws for all of us, which of course is factual. But what Korach does is the same as, I don't know if it's a mistake or the same misreading that the spies do. He goes all or nothing. He says, the only thing that matters is the mitzvah actions. We don't care about your individuality and your personal relationship with Hashem. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu is no different. The spies seem to say, all we care about is the love of Hashem. And we don't have time for all this, pedestrian mitzvah actions. It's way too simplified. I don't like organized religion. I don't like all these rules. I have love for God. So the response, of course, is that it's both. First of all, if we truly love Hashem, we'll do the mitzvahs because it's meaningful and important to Hashem that we do the mitzvahs. Say, I love Hashem, but I can't be bothered to do anything he wants, is a little suspicious on what, in fact, that means that I love Hashem. Or I say, well, I only do the mitzvahs. What else do you want? I don't have to have any real love for Hashem. Love is irrelevant. Only thing that matters is what I do. So then you get Korach. So here in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe is putting the emphasis on what is individualized And that is the love and fear of Hashem, in contrast to the mitzvah actions. Now, again, out there in the world, they were not so down with this. We don't have time for this. We got to study. We got to execute. We got to do. We got to master. And don't give me none of this namby-pamby stuff about whether you love. And you love, you don't love. That's it. It's take it or leave it. It's sort of either it is or it isn't. It's like any talent. Either you can run fast or you can't. Either you can sing nicely or you can't. Either you can play the piano or you can't. There's nothing you can do about it. And the Alter Rebbe is giving us a system through which we can mature and elevate and sensitize our love and fear of Hashem. So here we go. So first and foremost, the Alter Rebbe lays out that everybody, by the mere sense that, this is how you come out of the factory, everybody has a level of love that contains all of these levels that will ultimately be manifest. But they all begin from that basic sense of love. Now, here's where we got to get real nuanced. And I mean, we're talking here about, of course, our relationship with Hashem, but we could be talking about our relationship with our family and our friends and our children and our parents and our cousins and so on, just the same. So why do we love Hashem? Because it is embedded within our essential identity. If we say that we love Hashem because of what Hashem does for us, we are very dangerously, well, what if he doesn't do it for me anymore? Or what if somebody else does it better for me? So we've used the example so many times. If a parent says, I love my child because they get A's on every test, so if tomorrow they get an A-, then I don't love him anymore. But on the other hand, if I just say, well, I love you no matter what, and what's your name again? And don't you lie to me because you live here and I'll find out who you are, is not going to work either. Is there an essential love and is there a nuanced love? So the Alter Rebbe begins by saying that all love of Hashem is born of an essential nuanced love, which is like all mitzvah observance is born of the same essential sense that it's God's will. Why do we eat matzah? It's God's will. In fact, we just had an example of it in yesterday's parsha. It illustrates the point. Yesterday's parsha, the Torah spends a pretty inordinate amount of verses describing all of Esav's lineage. And it's like all this crazy stuff. And there's a common question, why do we have to know this? Who cares? But when the Gemara wants to illustrate the idea that every letter in a Torah is absolutely essential, it specifically quotes from this story in yesterday's parsha to tell you that if any letter in a Torah scroll is deformed or scratched or missing, whether it's from the Ten Commandments or it's from the description of Esau's convoluted lineage, the whole Torah has to be put on hold and can't be used until it's fixed. You might say, so who cares if we misspell the name of one of Esau's offspring? We don't like them anyway. But the answer is because who cares if we misspell one of the words of the Ten Commandments? Hashem cares. So the same Hashem who cares about this, cares about that. That is, it's not up to me, so to speak, on the user end to decide whether I think it's valuable, meaningful, significant, important. It's up to Hashem. So the same is true with my love of Hashem. Why do I love Hashem? So this is the Alter Rebbe's essential premise, whether you're a tzaddik, excuse me, who has Ava b'tainugim, or you're the person who's struggling even to have Avas Olam, a love born of the world. All of our love begins with that essential premise. So if we want to begin to look, what's the word, like a hard look, like a serious look, I'm not sure what the proper adjective is, at our love of Hashem, we have to begin with the essential premise. Why is it that I love Hashem? Because it is one with me. It is embedded within my neshama. And that's true of Moshe Rabbeinu's love. It's true of my love. It's true even of the person who says, I don't care about God. I'm an atheist. I'm not interested. I've been to synagogue. It's boring. I don't even like latkes, whatever it is. They make all of these claims that they're not interested. It's not meaningful to me and has no significance. So we got to build it up from the essential premise, from like sort of knock it down and then build it back from the beginning, and it begins to be built back from that essential level of it is innate to my identity because I have a neshama, which is an actual part of Hashem. And again, just like every child is drawn to their parent, even in the world of nature, they are drawn to their origin. That's how we begin. So that's like the Alter Rebbe's essential premise. That's like this chiddush, that this level of love is what consumes all love. Now, again, you can imagine that this will get some unhappy square looks. Why? Because somebody will say, well, are you saying that Moshe Rabbeinu's love for Hashem is essentially the same as that guy? Yeah, it is essentially the same. Now, Moshe has developed it. He's nuanced it. He's refined it. But just like the Olympic sprinter runs, and we also, Baruch Hashem, are able to walk, it's still the same essential dynamic, because God forbid the person who can't walk, he ain't running in the Olympics. So there's an essential functionality that is embedded in the identity of every Jew because of their neshama, and then we start to nuance it. So here's where we have this like precarious balancing act. On the one hand, we might feel the animal soul says, see, you love God. Of course you love God. You're very proud of it. You love God because you have a neshama. You love God. What's for dinner? What now? What? Okay, we did that. Check. Now what? In other words, yes, no. Do you love God? Yes. Check. Or can we say, can it be nuanced? Can it be developed? And is it just something that either it happens or it doesn't happen? Like the person goes to the museum and they look at art and they go, wow, that's the greatest. Or can there be truly an education of a music appreciation, art appreciation? And I don't just mean they play some music and he says, I appreciate that. Meaning, can we nuance, change, mature, grow, sensitize ourselves to our love for Hashem? And that's what the Alter Rebbe is talking about here. More than just yes, no. But it begins with that essential premise. So this line here, again, that there is one level of love that is the overarching source of all love. And again, you think about this, we're talking about our relationship with Hashem, but it's true in our relationship with our children. It's true in our relationship with our family. I guess we would say with friends too, because there's still some essential connection. It's true of Avos Yisrael, etc. We just had it actually in Hayom Yom this week about the Baal Shem Tov's message. You have to love every Jew, even a Jew you never met. And as I pointed out before, I love all the Jews I've never met. If I found out a Jew in South Africa won the lottery, I'm so happy. It's some of the Jews I have met that I got to work a little harder on. Why? Because the Jew in South Africa, I feel a kinship with him. The Jew who I know, he cut me off, or he was rude to me, or he took the last of the Milk Munch bars and I didn't get one, him I'm annoyed at. Why? Because it's become nuanced instead of in its essence. Okay. So here the Alter Rebbe starts to talk about how can we achieve this love. Not achieve is the wrong word. How can we refine this love? That's really the word. How can we mature this love? How can we nuance it? How can we make it something more than just like I'm calling it yes, no? So here we go. Behind us, so he begins with one strategy from the Zohar. Mashakasav Azayah ala pasuk. The Zohar writes on a pasuk. This pasuk comes from Yeshayahu, chapter 26, verse 9. The pasuk reads, Nafshi avisicha balayla. The pasuk reads, you are my soul, therefore I desire you, and I desire you at night. What does it mean, I desire you? So we'll explain. That he has passion, love for Hashem. It's Aramaic, but you recognize the similar Hebrew word rachem is to be merciful, like rachmanis. But in English, that word sometimes sounds condescending. Oh, I pity you. It's like a little put down, but the root of the word there is the word warmth. I have a warmth for you. The nafshe verucha, that I have a longing for you like I long for my very existence. Meaning, the translation of this pasuk in its most literal sense, if we were to just like really plug it in real rigidly, we'd read it as, my soul, I long for you at night. Now, which one is it? Is it my soul I'm longing for? What do you mean I'm longing for my soul? If it's my soul, I'm not longing for it. It should either say, my soul desires you, Hashem. That would be sort of more grammatically, or I desire you. So why does it say, my soul, I desire you? Who's talking to who? I'm talking to my soul, or I'm talking to Hashem? So this is the Zohar's point. Like the person longs for himself, he longs for Hashem. In other words, he's saying, you are my neshama, you are my identity. Hashem, you are who I truly am, and therefore I desire you. This is what it means, my soul, I desire you. Hashem is my soul, meaning it's not my soul desires something other, it's not something else, or as Rabbi Friedman likes to say, we're not becoming religious. Excuse me a second. We're not stepping out of ourselves. We're identifying that Hashem truly is my identity. That a person longs for Hashem like they long for their own sustainability. That is, excuse me, the greatest desire we have, and we even call it the greatest pleasure, although that word pleasure tends to be associated with like less than significant things, it's indulgences. But what the truest pleasure is to be alive. That's our greatest pleasure, because that's what we truly long for. I was once at a program, and there was like an Ask the Rabbi, and I was in the audience, and there was mostly college kids. And a college kid asked the rabbi, what are the halachas, what are the laws of burying somebody in a Jewish cemetery if they committed suicide? So I think, wow, so there's all kinds of halachas about it. But what struck me was that the rabbi didn't talk about the halachas. He talked about, God forbid, if you know somebody who is considering this and so on. Meaning, we know that in our society today, unfortunately, suicide has become, I don't mean this to be flip, a rich man's disease. It's college students in the most elite universities. And you think, well, these people, quote unquote, have the most to live for. But what's happened when we have removed the sense that being alive is itself the greatest blessing? The greatest bracha is to be alive. That is innately the most important characteristic. Now, again, hopefully this is incredibly obvious, but unfortunately, as we know, it's becoming decreasingly so. And this is what the Alter Rebbe points out, that this pasuk, which most literally, he's quoted in the Zohar, which most literally would translate as, my soul, I desire you, seems to not make grammatic sense. Who's the desirer and who's the desiree? And yet that's the answer. The answer is that I recognize that Hashem is my identity. It's one of the aspects of the Rebbe's birthday campaign, that a person's birthday is the day that Hashem said the world cannot exist without you. And every year on your birthday, Hashem affirms that the world cannot go forward without you. And we are affirming that Hashem is my identity. It's not something about me. It's not some characteristic. There isn't that. That's not the me. Now, one of the beautiful consequences of this mentality is we start to say, then who am I? Now, the world says, do you believe in God? Now, the presumption in that statement is that there's a you. And then the question is, do you believe in God? So Chassidus says it's the opposite. There's God. And so where do I fit into this? Do I truly exist? Do I have an existence? And our answer is, our existence is the way in which Hashem manifests himself through me. Now, that's both disturbing to my animal soul, because then I can't do what I want to do, because my existence is that I am a manifestation of Hashem, and it is concurrently absolutely embedded in my identity, or it absolutely, affirms my identity. That's what I'm looking for. As we are familiar, the Alter Rebbe commonly references the message of Mesiras Nefesh, surrendering my life for Hashem, hopefully not in the literal, but each one of us in a little micro Mesiras Nefeshes. When I choose not to participate in gossip, I am having Mesiras Nefesh, social isolation and all that kind of stuff. Why? Because Hashem is my existence. So I can't have an existence without Hashem. It would be, to think about it in the biological sense, to say I can't exist without air, without blood, without my biological necessities, because say, well, just give up breathing. Well, I can't give up breathing. I think it was the American Lung Association had that slogan: when you can't breathe, nothing else matters. So if you don't have Hashem, then I don't have an existence. It's not like life's not worth living without an iPhone 7, or life isn't worth living without friends, or life isn't worth living without dignity. It's that I don't have life without Hashem. That is my identity. That is who I am. So this is what it means. My soul longs for you. This means that since Hashem is who I am, that is my identity. Like Yonah said during the tempest, I'm a Jew and I fear Hashem. That's who I am. Lekach, therefore, I long for it. I'm sorry, we're there. Kushu cholosh. What happens when a person gets weak, umu'una, and like deprived? Mesava v'tov shetoshav nafshi elav. He longs and desires for his resuscitation, to, like they say, come back to himself. And again, we have the luxury of thinking that our great passions are indulgences. Thank God. And this is what it reminds us, that that's truly who we are. Therefore, when a person goes to sleep, why is he going to sleep? Because, and we even say it in English, I'm dead tired, meaning we feel that our body has completely run out of steam and we need to be refreshed. This is what it means to have the longing for Hashem. The Rambam writes in the halachas of the love of Hashem, because again, it's a nuanced halacha like the laws of matzah and mezuzahs and so forth. He quotes Shlomo HaMelech that he equates it to romantic love, to where there's no sense of awareness of anything other than the desire to be associated with the beloved. And how do we then satiate? How do we slake that thirst? How do we address this need? Through connecting ourselves with Hashem, which is infinitely accessible through Torah. I just want to finish this line. We'll come back for a moment. That I wake up from my sleep, because remember the pasuk says, I long for you all night. Why does it say I long for you all night, not I long for you all day? What is it about the night? So here the Alter Rebbe is sort of intertwining these two metaphors. Just like at night, after a person has worked hard all day, they are, again, we use the phrase dead tired, and they long to rejuvenate their physical body. They long for sleep. So too, when a person is longing for Hashem, but they don't go to sleep, that is, instead of addressing their physiological need for refreshment, they instead, like the pasuk says, they long for Hashem at night. They wake up at night, and instead they study at night. That is, the Rambam says this again in the halachic perspective, that Torah study at night preserves existence. Now, why? What's better to study Torah at night than Torah during the day? Well, he's not talking about a student. He's talking about a person who has a job, and they get up early in the morning, and especially historically, they got up. We have so many halachas about davening. for people who need to be at work at sunrise. And what time can you daven, and can you do a shorter davening, because that was common. And then they physically labored all day, and they come home at night and they are, again, dead tired. And now they have a choice. What am I going to address? Am I going to go to sleep and refresh my physical body? Or am I going to address the longing of my neshama and attach it to Hashem? What's the method of attachment to Hashem? Is through Torah study. And the person, when they attach themselves to the Torah study, they are demonstrating that that is truly what my life is. What is it that I truly live for? Many are familiar with the story it's printed in the back of the Tehillim, about the man who said he gets up and he works so that he can have money, so that he can feed his family, so that he can get up and go to work and earn money so he can feed his family and so on. It's not evil, but it's simply for the fulfillment of his human side, without any awareness to his spiritual side. And in a sense, that's what Paro was getting all irritated with the Jews. The more they oppressed them, the more they proliferated. And he said, you have it backwards. Don't you know that the whole point is to build the cities of Pithom and Ramses? I guess they don't. So we need to teach them. So how do we teach them? We tell them to work harder. And at first they were like, yeah, this is great. Sure, you work harder, you can get these big, beautiful cities of Pithom and Ramses. But they lost their identity. So here the Alter Rebbe is, again, sort of intertwining through this pasuk, through the lens of this pasuk, this characteristic. And he continues, like it says in the Zohar, that those who long for Hashem, if you truly long for Hashem, you wake up at night and you study Torah until daybreak. Now, we know this on Shavuos. Why is it that we study Torah all night on Shavuos until daybreak? So we're familiar with the backstory that the Jews overslept, and like Chassidus explains, they didn't oversleep out of laziness. They did it because they thought it was going to bring them closer to Hashem, and then Hashem said, no, that's not the way to be closer to Hashem. Well, you're asleep in a spiritual state, but to be engaged in the material. But why are we studying Torah 2 a.m? For that, we should get up before daybreak and study and be studying Torah at daybreak. Why is it that we're studying Torah at 2 a.m? So another aspect of the lesson that we're learning here from the studying of Torah on Shavuos is that Hashem is offering us this opportunity to say, again, do you want to refresh your physical body, or do you want to refresh your spiritual body? Now, we know that, of course, a person has to be healthy, and the physical is not in opposition to the spiritual, etc. That's not our point here to say that we should go through sleep deprivation. Our point is that just as a person longs for their physical body to be refreshed, this is the longing and the yearning of the neshama. Now, earlier in Tanya, like in chapter 31 or something, or 30, the Alter Rebbe used this as an introduction to another strategy through which we can be connected with Hashem, which is that we should have simple rachmanis on our poor neshama, which is trapped within our physical body. And in that context, the Alter Rebbe is talking to the person who feels that they have no relationship with Hashem because of their personal failings, that they're lazy or they're indulgent or that they engage in inappropriate behaviors, whatever it may be. And as such, they feel, how can I have a relationship with Hashem? I am not a virtuous person. And in that context, the Alter Rebbe says, you're right, this person is doing bad things, and they are self-centered, and they're crass, and they're impetuous, and they're nasty, and they're all kinds of terrible things. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, have rachmanis on your poor neshama that's trapped within this body. It's true that your humanity, your personality, this is back in chapter 31, which is a different point than here. This is I want to contrast. Back in like 30, 31, the Alter Rebbe is talking about the person who feels that they can't have a relationship with Hashem because their humanity is too crass. And so the Alter Rebbe's recommendation is, so have rachmanis on your neshama. Simply have rachmanis on a poor neshama that's trapped within such a crass body. Here in chapter 44, the Alter Rebbe is continuously encouraging and referencing this person. Okay, now he's refined himself. So now he's not such a crass and lowly person anymore. Now he's not just self-indulgent and kind of saying, etc. But what could still happen? He still sees his neshama as something of an addendum to his identity. And here the Alter Rebbe is saying, no, this is also a mistake. The mistake he's making is, or the reorientation, that's really probably the more proper way that we want you to think about it is, stop thinking about your body as your identity and your soul as some addendum to it. Stop identifying yourself as your age and your height and your hobbies and your IQ and your accomplishments. Start thinking about yourself only as your neshama, and as that your humanity is deriving its nourishment from your neshama. When you think about your humanity deriving its nourishment from your neshama, then you see that what you truly are is your neshama. Meaning, not like, I know you're a bad guy, but stop worrying about yourself and think about that poor neshama that's trapped within you. Have basic compassion on that neshama. Meaning, if you saw a child wandering around lost, you wouldn't say, well, who am I to help them? Yesterday, I spoke Lashon Hara. You would have Rachmanis on the child. So have Rachmanis on the neshama, even though you're a bad guy in 3031. Here the Alter Rebbe is saying to the person who has matured himself, he has refined his character, but there's still this disconnect where he's identifying his self by his humanity and not by his neshama. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is telling him. What you truly are driven to is your neshama. And therefore, in this illustration, when it comes to do I nourish my body or do I nourish my neshama, the answer is my neshama. That's why I wake up in the nighttime, which again is just the illustration of the point, to nourish my neshama. Okay. So that's the basic sense, that my identity is my neshama. And that's what I want. Well, what is the great love, the overflowing love, the immeasurable love? It too is buried in the nefesh of every Jew. Now, this is, in a certain perspective, a radical departure from what the Alter Rebbe has been saying until now. You recall, of course, one of the basic premises of Tanya is that a neshama is gifted. And some neshamas can become tzaddikim, and other neshamas can work day and night and really put in their effort, but they don't have that capacity. You know, some people can practice the piano 3 hours a day, and they can learn to play the piano and be piano players, but they're still not going to be great piano players. It's still going to be something that's somewhat unnatural to them. And other people have a natural proclivity for it. And the same thing with tzaddik. But here the Alter Rebbe is telling us that even this level of Ava Rabbah, which is overflowing, it's beyond anything I can detail and nuance and explain, et cetera, et cetera. But that too is encased and hidden within every nefesh. Yerusha mi'avosenu, as an inheritance from our ancestors. He mashakasa b'raya mehemna, and this is what is alluded to in the statement of the Raya Mehemna. The Raya Mehemna is a commentary, it means trusted shepherd, but it's the name of a book in this context. That's a commentary on the Zohar. And it says, Kibara deshtaldo basar avuye v'ime derachman lan yesem migamel v'nafshi v'rucheh chulu ki eloi ve'echad l'kulanu. That a person is like a child whose passion and love for their parents, their father and their mother, whom they love more than themselves, and their soul and their being. For Hashem is all our Father. So we have a premise, we talked about it on Shabbos, which we'll summarize here again, that every child longs to be connected with their parent, more than they even long for themselves. Now, again, unfortunately, as we know, people could have bad experiences, etc. But innately, the child longs for their parent. That's why every child, no matter what, and how grown up they are and how successful they are, longs to just curl up in their mother's lap once again. You see it even with newborns who almost seem to be crawling back into their mother. We talk about it with people who, sadly, if their parents have passed and they're sad about it. And somebody might say, not to be rude, but they would say, well, why are you sad? You don't need your mother to will hold your hand and make your peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. You're an adult. Why? Because it's not about the functionality. It's not that I need mothering. It's that this deep need for their parent, even if they say, well, what do you need your parent? You can take care of yourself. You don't need someone to teach you how to balance your checkbook or drive or whatever it is, because it's not about the functionality. It's about that depth. We referenced this in the Parsha. The Rebbe asked a question once, and he sort of left it open for people to respond. We know in last week's Parsha that we read yesterday that Yaakov Avinu is reprimanded, punished, because when he meets up with Esav, he does not allow Dinah to meet with Esav. It describes he puts her in a box because he's afraid, he doesn't want Esav to see Dinah. But he's reprimanded because Dinah could have brought Esav to tshuva. And therefore, Yaakov is reprimanded. However, the Rebbe asks, we also find that when Yaakov introduces all of his wives and sons to Esav, only by Rachel does it say that he introduced Yosef ahead of Rachel. The others, it says the mothers and then the children. But by Rachel, it says Yosef and then Rachel. So Rashi points out because Yosef stood in front of Rachel because he didn't want Esav to get near his mother. So the Rebbe asked the question, how come Yosef isn't reprimanded? For maybe Rachel could have brought Esav to tshuva. So we explain, because that's the difference between a parent's obligation, which is to educate the child, that Yaakov, again, at his level, whatever it means, bypassed, that he could have taught Dinah that she may have had the capacity to bring Esav to tshuva, and instead of directing her and educating her, he was overly protective. Again, whatever it means specifically is beyond the scope here, but it's this idea when parents are overprotective, they put their child in a box, they're overprotective, they don't let they're not educating the child as to what their capacities are. But Yosef it's not his obligation to educate his mother, direct his mother. His intuitive nature and role is to protect his mother, as we just read, because his love for his mother is more even than his love for the opportunity that his mother may bring Esav to tshuva. And that's to be lauded. So it's not the difference between Dinah and Rachel, it's the difference between a father's relationship and obligation to educate and direct and teach his child, in contrast to a son who's not obligated to teach his mother, but is obligated and is intuitively programmed to protect his mother. So this level of love, that it's Hashem, and I wouldn't think otherwise, it's that sort of intuitive, reflexive love, that automatic love, that everybody also has the capacity within their existence. And then we're going to talk about how we can develop it and how we can nuance it and how we can discover it. But we'll stop here. A reminder